The Vice President of Sudan, Malik Agar, says the international community must assist Sudan to achieve peace. Speaking exclusively to SABC International news editor Sophie Mokoena, Agar says he spoke to South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa about the current situation prevailing in that country. This week, the UN Secretary-general Antonio Guterres issued a warning that Sudan has reached a crisis in relation to the escalating conflict in that country.
My country is at war, and as such, even though it is an internal issue, but we are also looking for the assistance of the friends, and we are looking directly to the countries that we have connections with, whether these are connections economically or otherwise. So South Africa is an important country in the political arena of the African Union and in Africa. It's a country that have led so many initiatives, and we wanted to see the contribution of South Africa. What could they contribute in such a situation, given the difficulties that we are in? So that these are the two issues that I visited South Africa.
Why are we back where Sudan finds itself at war or having this serious conflict?
Sudan has been into wars before even the independence of Sudan. The wars continued since 1924 and then 1947 again, and 53, and the serious one was 1955 before the independence of Sudan. What is most of the problems in Sudan are manifested from the mismanagement of the diversity of Sudanese. Sudan is a diverse country in terms of culture, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of religion, and even geography. Sudan is a diverse country, and that diversity was mismanaged, and it led into crisis of identity, into crisis of uneven development in the country, and this actually breed violence in Sudan, because most of the Sudanese, in the countryside, were not used to the civil protest, and that one is not here. So the most nearest method for them to express themselves is violence, and so Sudan continued in wars. Circle of wars, agreement not dishonored, and then again war and such. But this one is particularly different. It's categorically different, because this one has internal dimensions, external dimensions. The internal dimensions are what I have talked about, is a mismanagement of the diversity. But there is also external dimensions. These external dimensions are actually a struggle over economic resources. Sudan is a resourceful country. Sudan is also neighboring is at the neighbor of the Red Sea. So this position of Sudan itself is actually an attraction to economic struggle between the countries. So the external dimension is there, the internal dimension is there, and also three things went wrong in Sudan. One is a counterinsurgency group went wrong, because when there is wars, they form counterinsurgency group in the places where in the constituencies of the insurgency. So this one, they were developed on tribal formations, and as such, actually, they continued in the tribal formations, and then you have armies other than the Sudanese army, who are tribally based, and they are tribal formations. This is one. And also, when the change happened in 2019, the revolution of the December revolution that toppled Bashir, then also there was a mismanagement of that revolution itself. So there was no clear, there is no clear plan. There is no clear roadmap of how to administer the aftermath of the revolution, and there was a tug of war, and between the military component and then the civilian components, and there was no guidance for them how to create the coherency that is needed so that they administer the country. So this is one of the difficulties, and as such as the difficulties is created also mistrust, high mistrust between the components of the country. This mistrust led to mismanagement of also the anger. On the 25th of October 2021, the army took over. This is aggravated the whole thing. And then issue of the democratic transformation of the country. This is where you had so many foreign intervention in the whole country, in terms sometimes at the cover of the advice, sometimes at the cover of pushing to the democratic transformation. You know, the West has its own way of pushing the issue. So this one have actually divided the two antagonistic armies in the Sudan, and then they all also got divided along the division of the civilian composition or civilian group. And on the 13th, and the war erupted in Sudan. The war erupted in Sudan. It is on a basis of there is many elements. That I said, there is internal element, there is external element. Even in the external elements, there is issue of power struggle also at one point of a time between the civilian component, between the army component, between the army and the army, between the civilian and the civilian. So there was a complex of so many issues that led to the war. But the war is devastating because it's not like other wars. Imagine if you have the war directly in Johannesburg and not in the suburb. You can imagine the destruction that is going to happen when the buildings, the build-up areas, and then the roads are being taken as the field of operation of a military. Then you can imagine the destruction that is going to happen in terms of human population, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of whatever you think it is in the country.
The ceasefire is not implemented. Why?
Of course, if you have a ceasefire, but you don't have the necessary mechanisms and the implementing mechanisms of how is it going to be implemented or being held, then you don't have a ceasefire. You have an academic ceasefire where you announce that we have a ceasefire, but you don't have the tools, the necessary tools of how to you apply this on the ground and towards it. So, for example, in Jeddah, you have when they talk about the ceasefire now, as in this current war, it's talk about ceasefire, and then, but they don't have the mechanism. They say, okay, we wanted the forces, the rapid SRF forces, to get out from the residential areas, from the institutions, services institutions, but you didn't specify for them where to go and how to go and what are the logistics for them where to go, what is the security in the new camps or the security in routes to the new camps. If you don't, these are procedural issues, but they are more important even than announcing the cessation of hostilities if you don't put them in order so that they assist you in achieving the ceasefire. But just announcing the ceasefire, it looks like a rhetoric. It doesn't look real when you just announce it without mechanism. So I think primarily this is where there's no holding ceasefires in Sudan. When we were fighting, was leading the SPLM North, when we were fighting, we had ceasefires, but you have ceasefire, you negotiated the mechanisms of implementation and then the procedural issues before you announce the ceasefire. But if you do that, then you announce the ceasefire, then you will say, oh yes, this one is supposed to do it. Day one is supposed to happen this, day two is supposed to happen this. But in this now this is absent, and such is absent, then you don't have ceasefire. You have an announced ceasefire, but you don't have a practical ceasefire on the ground.
Egypt has announced yesterday that they will be convening talks, or they want to intervene or mediate. Are you aware of such an initiative from the Egyptian government?
Actually, there are so many initiatives. There is an African Union initiative, and what they call the wider mechanism. There is an IGAD, initiative. There is other initiatives that are growing up there, and then there is also the Jeddah initiative. There are so many initiatives for the problem of Sudan, and this by itself, this categorically by itself is a problem. That when you have so many initiatives for one problem for one country, then something is questionable, something is fundamentally wrong. The Egypt is not an Egypt initiative. This is what you call the neighboring countries initiatives. These neighboring countries are Egypt, Chad, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Central African Republic. Of course, these are the countries that are affected directly by the war in Sudan in any terms, economically, security, and also the displacement of the people and refugees. They go to these countries. So I think they are concerned countries so that they actually address this. They are so much concerned and they are so much alerted by the situation that is happening at their backyards. And they met yesterday. I saw the communique. The communique was very reasonable and very promising. But again, when you have others there, if you don't actually amalgam them together and then put them together under one initiative, then we still have a problem. So what you need is a big tent where you bring all these and survey them and then bring them inside there so that you speak in one voice regarding the issue of Sudan. If you speak in so many voices, then you have also so many groups that are listening to this voice or listening to that voice. So it's problematic by itself.
While leaders are fighting, ordinary Sudanese are suffering, particularly women. We've seen thousands fleeing the country, many dying. Only yesterday, there was a report presented at the Security Council that the war has escalated. The Secretary-general Antonio Guterres warning that this crisis is getting out of hand. What are leaders saying? Why Africans must suffer like this?
The Africans are trying their level best, but as I said, they are scattered between the scattered initiatives. So we wish them that come together as one block to solve this problem. There is this, in the African Union, there is a clause that talks about African problems we solve in-house African community. We welcome that one and we welcome them to come and address the problem in Sudan, but they must speak with one voice. But if they speak with different voices, then also this gives room to others who are not necessarily Africans to come in also and chip in and to try to do to solve the issues, which they don't know. They are very far about it. About the United Nations, of course, this is a very important organization. It's the Universal World Organization that also is supposed to have a say. But that's a big organization. They move very slowly when it comes to these issues, and also, their credibility in terms of addressing the issues is being guided by diverse, sometimes credible and incredible moves and methods. So we also wish the United Nations will put their foot on the ground and help the Africans, because this is an African issue. It has to be inside Africa. And it is a Sudanese issue. It has to be inside Sudan. So we would wish them to help us in this manner, but not to interfere in our affairs.
And finally, as you are in South Africa right now, you've met different stakeholders. What do you expect from people that you've engaged with in terms of assisting to bring this conflict to an end?
Definitely, I'm going to meet several players in the South African state, and friends, comrades, all comrades, friends, and all these things. But also my target was the president, because the president is the one leading the country of South Africa, and they have a say in the United Nations, they have a say in an African Union, and we are sure that the President Cyril Ramaphosa will play his role towards the Sudan issue. And before my coming here, he was doing his best and playing his role in this. I had several telephone calls with him, and he was actually doing without being told that to do something. So he's present and available all the time for this issue. It is mine, just to encourage him that, Mr. President, you are doing your level best, but we want you to increase what is already there.